She should have been invisible to him by now. But there she was, holding everything he didn't know he'd lost. The morning rush hour in Manhattan moved like clockwork around Darian Voss as he sat trapped in his black Tesla, fingers drumming impatiently against the leather steering wheel. His phone buzzed with notifications. 3 missed calls from his London office, a text about the Henderson campaign deadline, and a calendar reminder for the board meeting that would determine the next quarter's international expansion. At 36, Darian had mastered the art of multitasking. Even now, stuck in traffic on Fifth Avenue, he was mentally rehearsing his presentation, while his eyes scanned the sea of pedestrians hurrying past. Success had taught him to see opportunities everywhere, to never waste a moment, to always be 3 steps ahead. The light turned red. His Tesla came to a complete stop. That's when he saw her, standing at the bus stop across the street, wearing a faded denim jacket and holding a small canvas bag, was Nalia Pierce, his ex-wife, the woman who had walked out of his life exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days ago. Not that he was counting, but she wasn't alone. In her arms, nestled against her chest in a soft pink blanket, was a baby, a little girl with chubby cheeks and tiny fists that reached toward the morning sun. Even from this distance, even through the tinted windows of his car, Darian could see the child's face clearly. The dimples, the shape of her eyes, the way she tilted her head with curious attention. His breath caught in his throat. The baby looked exactly like him. Darian's hands went slack on the steering wheel. His phone continued buzzing with urgency, but the sound seemed to come from another universe. All he could focus on was the image across the street. Nalia bouncing the child gently, whispering something that made the little girl giggle, completely unaware that her entire world was being observed by a man who suddenly felt like a stranger to himself. The bus arrived with a hydraulic hiss. Nalia climbed aboard, the baby still secure in her arms, and disappeared behind tinted windows. Within seconds, the bus pulled away from the curb and merged into traffic, carrying with it the only 2 people who mattered. The light turned green. Cars behind him began honking. Darian sat frozen, his mind racing with calculations that had nothing to do with profit margins or market strategies. 2 years since the divorce. The timing fit perfectly. The resemblance was undeniable. But why hadn't she told him? Why had she vanished from his life so completely that he didn't even know she lived in the city again? His phone rang. The caller ID showed, Henderson, urgent. For the first time in his professional career, Darian Voss let it go to voicemail. He pulled over to the curb, his hands shaking slightly as he opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't touched in 24 months. Nalia's number was still there, saved under N, personal, a remnant from their married life when he had tried to separate his worlds with surgical precision. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Darian stared at the screen, then immediately opened Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, every platform where he might find a trace of her. Nothing. Her profiles had vanished as completely as if she had never existed in the digital world at all. But she was real. The baby was real. And somewhere in this massive city, they were living a life that he knew nothing about. A life that might include his daughter. The word hit him like a physical blow. Daughter. He had a daughter. Maybe. Probably. The resemblance had been too strong to ignore. Too precise to be coincidence. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his assistant. Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. Henderson campaign needs approval ASAP. Where are you? Darian looked at the message, then at the empty bus stop where his entire world had just shifted off its axis. He typed back, cancel everything. I need to find someone. For the first time in years, work would have to wait. Hurricane. And as he sat there in his expensive car, surrounded by the chaos of morning traffic, Darian realized he was about to learn the difference between building an empire and building a family. Some ghosts refuse to stay buried, especially when they're carrying your future in their arms. 3 days had passed since the bus stop revelation, and Darian Voss found himself doing something he hadn't done in over a decade, failing at a task. His usual methodical approach, the same systematic thinking that had built his advertising empire, seemed useless when applied to finding 1 woman and a baby in a city of 8 million people. He sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of Manhattan, but his attention was fixed on his laptop screen. Search results for Nalia Pierce Brooklyn teacher, filled multiple browser tabs, public records, school district websites, social media archives cached by search engines. Nothing recent, nothing useful. His assistant, Cordelia, knocked and entered with his usual afternoon espresso. The Yamamoto presentation is ready for your review, and the Amsterdam team wants to schedule a call about Cordelia. Darian didn't look up from his screen. I need you to find someone, discreetly. She set the coffee down carefully. In the 3 years she'd worked for him, he'd never made a personal request. Of course. What information do you have? Her name is Nalaya Pierce. She's a literature teacher, probably in Brooklyn, mid-30s, about 5'6", brown hair. He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. She used to be my wife. Cordelia's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained professional. I'll reach out to our research contacts. Quietly, after she left, Darian leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The image from the bus stop played in his mind on an endless loop. Nalaya's gentle smile as she looked down at the baby, the way the child's tiny hand had clutched at her jacket, the unmistakable curve of dimples that mirrored his own. His phone buzzed. A text from his brother Kendrick in Seattle. Mom's asking about Thanksgiving plans. You coming home this year or still married to that office? Darian stared at the message. Married to the office. His family had been saying that for years, even during his actual marriage. Even Nalaya had said it, toward the end. I feel like I'm competing with your ambition, she'd told him during one of their last real conversations. And I'm losing. He'd dismissed it then, convinced that she simply didn't understand the bigger picture. Building something lasting took sacrifice. Once the company was stable, once the international expansion was complete, once he'd secured their future, then he'd have time for everything else. But everything else had walked away before he'd realized it was what mattered most. His laptop chimed with a new email. Cordelia's efficiency was legendary. Found 3N Pierce listings in Brooklyn school districts. 2 are retirement age. 1 is Nalaya Pierce, literature teacher at Riverside High School in Park Slope. Attached is the school's contact information. No current address on file. Darian's heart hammered against his ribs. Riverside High School, Park Slope. She was real, findable, just a few subway stops away from his world of glass towers and board meetings. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, ignoring Cordelia's surprised look as he passed her desk. I cancel my afternoon appointments, he called over his shoulder. I'll be back later. The subway ride to Brooklyn felt surreal. Darian couldn't remember the last time he'd taken public transportation. The C train was crowded with afternoon commuters, teenagers with backpacks, elderly women clutching grocery bags, normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that his universe was quietly imploding. Riverside High School was a typical brick building surrounded by chain-link fencing and scattered with the debris of teenage life, discarded chip bags, forgotten textbooks, graffiti that had been painted over multiple times. Nothing like the pristine corporate environments where Darian spent his days. He stood across the street, watching the entrance. Teachers began filtering out around 3:30, some alone, others in small groups, discussing lesson plans and student progress. He recognized the rhythm of their conversations from his own high school days, back when his biggest concern was making varsity basketball. Then he saw her. Nalaya emerged from the main entrance carrying a worn leather satchel and a stack of papers that threatened to spill onto the sidewalk. She looked exactly the same but somehow different, more confident, perhaps, or maybe just more tired. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore a simple green sweater that brought out the color of her eyes. She was alone. No baby in sight. Darian crossed the street before he could second-guess himself. Nalaya. She turned at the sound of her name, and for a moment, her face went completely blank. Then her expression shifted through surprise, recognition, and something that looked dangerously close to anger. Darian. Her voice was steady, controlled. What are you doing here? I saw you 3 days ago, at the bus stop on 5th Avenue. He took a step closer, studying her face for any tell, any crack in her composure. You were holding a baby. Nalaya's grip tightened on her papers. And she looked like me, Nalaya. She had my eyes, my dimples. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Is she mine? For a long moment, Nalaya just looked at him. Students streamed past them, laughing and shouting, but the space between them felt isolated, suspended in time. Finally, she spoke. Yes, Darian. Amara is your daughter. But that doesn't mean… Amara. The name hit him like a prayer he'd forgotten he knew. Her name is Amara. That doesn't mean… Nalaya continued, her voice gaining strength, that you get to just show up here and disrupt our lives. We've been fine without you. We'll continue to be fine without you. She turned to walk away, but Darian reached out, not quite touching her arm. Wait, please. I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you… Nalaya whirled around, and now there was fire in her eyes. Tell you what, Darian? That I was pregnant? When? Between your trips to London and Los Angeles? During the 3 months you spent in Singapore without calling once? You made it very clear that your priorities were elsewhere. But a baby, Nalaya, a baby changes everything. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything changes for you, maybe. But for me, I've been changing everything for the past 2 years. Every single day. The words hung between them like a challenge, and as she walked away toward the subway station, her papers clutched tightly against her chest, Darian realized that finding her had been the easy part. The hard part was going to be proving he deserved to stay. Sometimes the smallest hands hold the power to break down the tallest walls. Nalaya's apartment was nothing like the penthouse Darian remembered from their marriage. The 5th-floor walk-up in Park Slope had creaky hardwood floors, windows that stuck when you tried to open them, and a radiator that clanged like an off-key orchestra every morning at 6. But as he climbed the narrow staircase, following Nalaya's reluctant footsteps, he felt more nervous than he had before any board presentation. 3 days of persistent but respectful texts had finally worn down her resistance. Not pleas or demands, but simple questions. What's her favorite color? Does she like music? Can I at least see a picture? Finally, Nalaya had responded. Sunday, 2 p.m., 1 hour. Don't bring anything expensive. Now, standing outside apartment 5B, Darian could hear sounds he'd never associated with Nalaya before. The babbling chatter of a toddler, the gentle melody of a children's song playing from a phone speaker, the soft thud of small feet against the floor. Nalaya opened the door before he could knock. She wore jeans with paint stains on the knees, and an oversized sweater that had clearly seen better days. Her hair was pulled back messily, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and early mornings. She looked beautiful. She just woke up from her nap, Nalaya said without preamble. She might be cranky. Don't take it personally if she cries. Darian nodded, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. In boardrooms, he commanded attention effortlessly. Here, in this small hallway that smelled like vanilla candles and baby powder, he felt like an imposter. The living room was a study in organized chaos. Children's books were stacked on every available surface. Colorful toys filled a wicker basket in the corner, and a playmate with hanging mobiles dominated the center of the room. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable. A thrift store couch covered with a handmade quilt, a coffee table that doubled as a toy storage unit, walls decorated with Nalaya's students, artwork and candid photos of a baby learning to crawl, to stand, to smile, and there, sitting in a high chair with more applesauce on her face than in her mouth, was Amara. Darian's breath caught in his throat. She was perfect. Chubby cheeks dusted with applesauce, dark hair that curled at the edges just like his had as a child, and those unmistakable dimples that appeared every time she gurgled with delight. She wore a pink onesie with tiny elephants printed all over it, and her feet kicked enthusiastically against the footrest of her chair. When she saw him, she stopped eating and tilted her head with curious attention. Amara, this is… Nalaya paused, then settled on, this is Darian. Can you say hi? Amara stared at him for a long moment, then clapped her applesauce-covered hands together and let out a delighted squeal. Darian felt something crack open in his chest. Can I… He gestured toward her, unsure of the protocol. Nalaya nodded reluctantly. Let me clean her up first. She lifted Amara from the high chair with practiced ease, wiping the baby's face and hands with a damp cloth while keeping up a steady stream of gentle chatter. There we go, sweet girl. All clean now. Are you going to be good for Mama? Watching Nalaya with their daughter was like seeing an entirely different person. The woman who had once struggled to keep plants alive now moved with confident grace, anticipating Amara's needs before the baby even expressed them. She'd become a mother in every sense of the word. Patient, intuitive, completely devoted. Here, Nalaya said, settling onto the couch with Amara on her lap. You can sit next to us. Darian perched on the edge of the couch, maintaining careful distance. Up close, Amara was even more captivating. She studied him with solemn brown eyes, occasionally reaching out to grab at his tie before Nalaya gently redirected her attention. "She's incredible," he whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break the spell. "She's also teething, so don't be surprised if she tries to gnaw on your watch," Nalaya said with a hint of amusement. As if on cue, Amara lunged forward and grabbed Darian's hand, immediately bringing his fingers to her mouth to investigate. "Oh, Amara, no." Nalaya started to intervene, but Darian shook his head. "It's okay." He looked down at his daughter, as she gummed his knuckles with determined concentration. "Does it hurt?" "The teething. Sometimes. She has good days and bad days. Last week she barely slept for 3 nights straight." Nalaya's voice softened. "But she's resilient. Aren't you, baby girl?" Amara released Darian's hand and clapped again, this time looking directly at him as if she expected applause in return. Without thinking, Darian clapped back. Amara's face lit up with pure joy. She clapped faster, giggling when he matched her rhythm. Soon they were engaged in an impromptu clapping concert, with Amara shrieking with laughter every time Darian added a silly sound effect. For the first time in years, Darian forgot about everything else. No phones buzzing with urgent messages, no mental calculations about quarterly projections, no strategic planning for the next business acquisition. Just this moment, this connection, this tiny person who somehow shared his DNA and his dimples and his apparent love of rhythm. "She likes you," Nalaya observed quietly. "I like her too." The words came out rougher than he intended. "I like her so much it scares me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Amara explore a soft fabric book with intense concentration. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting everything in golden light. "Nalaya," Darian said finally. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can I see her again? Not just once. Regularly. I want to be part of her life." Nalaya's expression grew guarded. "Darian, I know I wasn't there before. I know I have no excuse for that, but I'm here now. I want to try." "Trying isn't enough," she said quietly. "Amara needs consistency. She needs someone who won't disappear when work gets demanding or when the novelty wears off. I won't disappear. You've disappeared before." The words hit him like a physical blow, mostly because they were true. Amara chose that moment to crawl across the couch toward him, her small hands grabbing at his shirt for balance. Without conscious thought, Darian reached out to steady her, and she promptly collapsed against his chest with a contented sigh. The weight of her, warm and trusting, settled something deep in his soul. "Please," he said, looking at Nalaya over their daughter's head, "let me prove that I can be the father she deserves." Nalaya studied his face for a long moment, then glanced down at Amara, who had fallen asleep against Darian's shoulder. "We'll see," she said finally. But as he held his sleeping daughter for the first time, Darian realized that "we'll see" was the most hope he'd felt in years. The boardroom had never felt so intimidating, and he wasn't even there. Darian stood in the baby aisle of Target, surrounded by an overwhelming array of products he couldn't begin to understand. Organic baby food jars lined one shelf, while another displayed teething toys in every color imaginable. His phone buzzed with the 4th missed call from his office in the past hour, but for the first time in his career, work felt like background noise. It had been 2 weeks since that first meeting with Amara, and Nalaya had agreed to let him visit twice a week, Wednesdays after school and Saturday mornings. The arrangement came with strict rules. No expensive gifts, no disrupting Amara's routine, and absolutely no attempts to change anything about their living situation without explicit permission. He'd failed the first rule within 3 days. "Darian, what is this?" Nalaya had asked last Wednesday, staring at the professionally assembled educational play center that now dominated her living room. "It's developmentally appropriate for her age," he'd said defensively. "The reviews said it promotes cognitive development and fine motor skills. It costs more than my monthly grocery budget, but she likes it. Look." And Amara had indeed been fascinated by the colorful contraption, but Nalaya's expression had remained unimpressed. "That's not the point. You can't just buy your way into being a good father." Now, holding a simple cloth book that cost $12, Darian felt more nervous than he had about any business decision. The book featured different textures and crinkly pages designed to stimulate sensory development. According to the package, it was perfect for babies Amara's age. More importantly, It was something he could afford to be wrong about. His phone rang again. This time he answered. Voss. Darian, thank God, came Cordelia's voice. The Yamamoto presentation is in 2 hours and they're asking for revisions to the digital strategy. Where are you? He looked around at the baby bottles and diaper displays. I'm researching a new demographic. Can you be more specific? The team needs direction on. Tell them to proceed with the original proposal. I trust their judgment. Silence. In 3 years of working together, he'd never delegated a major presentation without personal oversight. Are you sure? This is a $40 million account. Darian picked up a package of organic baby snacks and read the ingredients list. No artificial colors, no preservatives, made with real fruit. Simple decisions, but they felt more important than any advertising campaign. I'm sure. If there are any problems, they can call me later. After hanging up, he continued his journey through the store. Each aisle revealed new mysteries. The difference between size 3 and size 4 diapers. Why some baby foods were smooth while others had chunks. Whether the Mickey Mouse sippy cup was better than the plain blue one. At the checkout line, he found himself behind a young mother with a baby slightly older than Amara. The woman moved with efficient grace, keeping her toddler entertained with silly faces while unloading a cart full of practical necessities. Wipes, formula, bananas, bread, laundry detergent. How old? She asked, noticing Darian's purchases. 15 months, he answered, then realized he wasn't even sure if that was accurate. Did Nalia count by months or weeks? When exactly was Amara's birthday? Oh, that's such a fun age. Is this your first? The question hit him unexpectedly. Yes, well, sort of. It's complicated. The woman smiled knowingly. It's always complicated, but it gets easier. The not knowing what you're doing part, the actual parenting never gets easier. As Darian drove back to Brooklyn, her words echoed in his mind. The not knowing what you're doing part. In business, he thrived on expertise, on being 3 steps ahead of every scenario. But with Amara, he felt like he was learning an entirely new language, one spoken in giggles and tears and tiny hands that reached for everything. He arrived at Nalaya's apartment to find chaos in progress. Amara was in the middle of what appeared to be a spectacular meltdown, arching her back and wailing while Nalaya tried unsuccessfully to get her into a fresh diaper. Hey, he said softly, setting his purchases aside. Can I help? She's been like this for 20 minutes, Nalaya said, exhaustion clear in her voice. I think she's getting sick. Or maybe it's the teeth again. I don't know. Darian approached slowly, remembering what he'd observed during previous visits. Has she eaten? She threw her lunch on the floor. Nap refused to go down. He crouched beside them, watching Amara's red, tear-streaked face. Without overthinking it, he began humming, a melody he didn't recognize but somehow knew, something his own mother might have sung to him decades ago. Amara's cries quieted to sniffles. Encouraged, Darian continued humming while Nalaya quickly secured the diaper tabs. When he added gentle hand-clapping to the melody, Amara actually smiled through her tears. How did you do that? Nalaya asked, genuine surprise in her voice. I have no idea. He looked down at Amara, who was now reaching for his face with sticky fingers. Lucky guess. She doesn't usually calm down for anyone but me when she's this upset. There was something in Nalaya's tone, not quite pride, but maybe the beginning of recognition, as if she was seeing him not as an intruder or an obligation, but as someone who might actually belong in this chaotic, beautiful world they'd created. I brought some things, Darian said, gesturing toward his shopping bags. Nothing expensive this time, just baby things. Nalaya raised an eyebrow but helped him unpack the items. The cloth book, the organic snacks, a simple wooden teething ring, and a pack of washable crayons designed for toddlers. These are perfect, she said, and he felt absurdly proud of her approval. They spent the next hour on the living room floor, taking turns reading to Amara from her new book and watching her attempt to eat the crayons instead of color with them. When Amara finally succumbed to sleep in Darian's arms, he didn't want to move. She's getting attached to you, Nalaya observed quietly. Is that a problem? It could be. If you decide this is too hard or too time-consuming. Darian looked down at his sleeping daughter, her small fist curled around his thumb. What if I don't decide that? Then we figure it out as we go. His phone buzzed with a text about the Yamamoto presentation. The client had loved the team's work. $40 million secured without his direct involvement. For once, the success felt secondary. "Nalaya," he said softly, "I know you don't trust me yet, and I know I have to earn that. But I want you to know, and this isn't a phase for me. This isn't something I'm trying out until I get bored." She studied his face, searching for something. "What about when work gets crazy again? What about when you have to travel? Then I'll figure out how to make it work, all of it. You've never had to balance anything before, Darian. Your career has always come first. Maybe it's time that changed." Amara stirred in his arms, making small sleeping sounds that went straight to his heart. And for the first time since he'd started building his empire, Darian wondered if he'd been measuring success all wrong. Sometimes the universe tests your commitments when you least expect it, and most need to prove yourself. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting Darian from the deepest sleep he'd had in weeks. His first instinct was to ignore it. Years of international business had taught him that middle-of-the-night calls rarely brought good news. But Nalaya's name on the caller ID made his heart stop. "Darian." Her voice was strained, barely above a whisper. "But I'm sorry to call so late, Tom, but I didn't know who else." "What's wrong?" He was already sitting up, reaching for the lamp switch. "It's Amara. She's been running a fever since yesterday, and now it's 103.5. I'm at Brooklyn Methodist Emergency Room, and they want to admit her for observation, but I can't. I don't have anyone to call my principal, and my subplans aren't ready, and I'm on my way." Darian was already pulling on clothes with one hand while holding the phone with the other. "Which hospital?" "Brooklyn Methodist on 6th Street. "Yes, but you don't have to." "I'm already in the car." The drive through empty Brooklyn streets felt endless. Every red light seemed to last forever. Every turn brought new scenarios his mind conjured about what might be wrong. He'd become somewhat familiar with normal baby challenges over the past month. Teething, fussy eating, sleep disruptions. But a high fever was uncharted territory that terrified him. He found Nalaya in the pediatric waiting area, still wearing the same clothes from their visit yesterday. Her hair was pulled back hastily, and she clutched a diaper bag that looked like it had been packed in a hurry. When she saw him, her carefully maintained composure cracked just slightly. "The doctor says it's probably just a virus, but they want to monitor her because babies can dehydrate quickly," she said without preamble. "She's been so fussy, and she won't eat anything, and I keep thinking about all the things I might have done wrong." "Hey." Darian sat beside her, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms. "You didn't do anything wrong. Kids get sick. It happens. You don't understand. I'm all she has. If something happens to me, if I can't take care of her properly, you're not all she has anymore." The words came out before he could consider their weight. "I'm here. We're handling this together." A nurse appeared with a clipboard. Amara's family. They both stood, and Darian realized this was the first time anyone had referred to them as a unit. Amara's family. Not Nalaya and her daughter. Not Darian visiting his biological child, but a family. "Mark, you can see her now. She's in room 314, and Dr. Martinez wants to discuss the treatment plan." Amara looked impossibly small in the hospital crib, surrounded by monitors and IV tubing. Her cheeks were flushed with fever, and she whimpered softly even in sleep. Darian felt something primal and protective surge through him, an instinct he didn't know he possessed. "The good news is that her blood work looks normal," Dr. Martinez explained. "We're dealing with a viral infection, probably picked up at daycare or from another child. The IV fluids will help with dehydration, and we'll monitor her temperature closely. Most babies recover from this within 48 to 72 hours. "Can I hold her?" Nalaya asked. Of course. Physical comfort is one of the best medicines at this age. Watching Nalaya cradle their sick daughter, murmuring soft reassurances and stroking Amara's sweaty hair, Darian felt the full weight of what single motherhood meant. Every fever, every worry, every 3 a.m. panic attack. Nalaya had handled it all alone for 15 months. "I need to call in sick for tomorrow," Nalaya said, pulling out her phone. "And figure out lesson plans for the substitute and What if I stayed?" Darian interrupted. She looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I stayed with Amara tomorrow so you can go to work? I can handle a sick baby for one day." "Darian, you have meetings. That presentation for the German client is this week. Cordelia can handle the presentation. The team knows what they're doing." He reached out tentatively and touched Amara's tiny hand where it rested against Nalaya's chest. "Besides, shouldn't I learn how to do this? The hard parts, not just the fun playing time. Nalaya studied his face. You've never taken care of a sick child before. You hadn't either, until you had to. That's different. She's been my responsibility from day one. Maybe it's time she became my responsibility too. The words hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to examine. But before Nalaya could respond, Amara stirred and opened her eyes, looking directly at Darian with the unfocused gaze of a feverish child. "Dada," she whispered. It was the first time she'd said anything that sounded remotely like a word for him. Nalaya's eyes widened in surprise, and Darian felt his heart stop completely. Did she just... She's been babbling a lot lately, Nalaya said quickly. It probably doesn't mean... Dada, Amara repeated, reaching toward him with a weak but determined hand. This time, Nalaya didn't object when Darian carefully took their daughter from her arms. Amara settled against his chest with a small sigh, and her fever-warm weight felt like the most important thing he'd ever been trusted to hold. The discharge paperwork should be ready in about an hour, Dr. Martinez said. Keep her hydrated, monitor the fever, and bring her back if it goes above 104, or if she shows signs of difficulty breathing. As they waited for clearance to leave, Darian made phone calls he'd never imagined making. He canceled 2 client meetings, postponed a conference call with the London office, Tanko, and asked Cordelia to reschedule everything on his calendar for the next 48 hours. Is everything all right? Cordelia asked. This isn't like you. My daughter is sick. Another first. The first time he'd referred to Amara as his daughter to anyone outside of Nalaya. It felt simultaneously natural and terrifying. By dawn, they were back at Nalaya's apartment. Amara was sleeping fitfully, her fever down to 101 but still concerning. Nalaya had finally agreed to go to work after Darian promised to call if anything changed. Her medicine is every 4 hours, she said for the 3rd time, gathering her school bag. The thermometer is on the kitchen counter. If her temperature goes above 103, call Dr. Patterson's office immediately. The number is on the refrigerator. I've got it, Nalaya. We'll be fine. She hesitated at the door. You're sure about this? Taking care of a sick baby isn't like the fun visits we've been having. I'm sure. After she left, Darian found himself alone with his daughter for the first time during a crisis. No Nalaya to guide him, no predetermined activities to fall back on. Just him, a sick 15-month-old, and the sobering realization that everything he thought he knew about fatherhood was about to be tested. Amara woke up crying around 9 a.m., her little body hot and miserable. When he picked her up, she immediately pressed her face against his neck and clung to him with surprising strength. I know, sweetheart, he murmured, swaying gently. I know you don't feel good. His phone buzzed with messages from work, but for the first time in his adult life, Darian Voss let them wait. Because he was learning that some things, the most important things, couldn't be delegated or rescheduled. When everything falls apart at once, you discover what you're really made of. The eviction notice was taped to Nalaya's door when Darian arrived for his Saturday morning visit with Amara. Bright orange paper with bold black letters that might as well have been written in neon. Notice to quit, 30 days to vacate premises. He stood in the hallway, reading the legal language that essentially meant his daughter was about to become homeless, when the door opened behind him. You're early, Nalaya said, then noticed what he was holding. Her face went pale. Oh, you saw that? Nalaya, what's going on? She took the notice from his hands and crumpled it slightly, as if making it smaller might make the problem disappear. The landlord sold the building. New owners want to renovate and convert to luxury condos. All the rent-stabilized tenants got notices. When did this happen? 2 weeks ago. She unlocked the door and they stepped inside, where Amara was playing contentedly with blocks on her playmat. I've been looking for new places, but everything in my price range is either too far from the school or... She gestured helplessly. Let's just say the options aren't great. Darian processed this information while watching Amara stack colorful blocks with intense concentration. His daughter, their daughter, had no idea that her entire world was about to be uprooted. What about your parents? Could you stay with them temporarily? Nalaya laughed, but there was no humor in it. My parents retired to Arizona 3 years ago. They're living in a 55-plus community with strict visitor policies. Besides, they made it clear when I got divorced that I was on my own. Other family. My sister lives in Oregon with 4 kids of her own. She's barely managing as it is. The weight of Nalaya's isolation hit him fully. While he had been building his empire, she had been building a life with no safety net, no backup plan, no one to call when everything went wrong. "I'll help you find something," he said. "I know people in real estate. I can make some calls." "With what money, Darian?" The words came out sharper than she probably intended. "Do you have any idea what rent costs in this city for a decent apartment? Even the not-so-decent ones?" He didn't, actually. His penthouse mortgage was automatically deducted from his account each month, a number he barely noticed among his other expenses. "I could—" "No." Her voice was firm. "I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no. I won't take money from you. I won't be some charity case you throw cash at to make yourself feel better. This isn't about making myself feel better. This is about making sure my daughter has a safe place to live. Your daughter has been safe and loved for 15 months without your help. We'll figure this out without your help too." The words stung, mostly because they highlighted how absent he'd been during the most crucial time in Amara's life. But before he could respond, his phone rang with an international number. "London office. I need to take this," he said automatically, then caught himself. "Actually, no, I don't." But Nalaya had already heard the familiar ringtone that used to dominate their married life. "Take it, Darian, I know you need to. It can wait." "Can it? Or are you going to be distracted and checking your phone every 5 minutes until you call them back?" She knew him too well. Even now, his mind was calculating time zones and wondering what crisis required Saturday morning intervention. "It's the Henderson campaign," he admitted. "Well, there might be complications with the international rollout. Take the call." Against his better judgment, he answered. What followed was 20 minutes of crisis management, a misunderstanding with the German client, budget overruns in the Tokyo office, and a competitor launching a similar campaign that threatened to undermine 6 months of development work. When he finally hung up, Nalaya was feeding Amara lunch, both of them pointedly ignoring him. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was important, but—" "They're all important, Darian, that's the problem." "What do you mean?" She wiped applesauce from Amara's chin with practiced efficiency. "Do you remember what you used to say when we were married? Just let me handle this one crisis, and then I'll be fully present. But there was always another crisis, always another emergency that only you could solve. This is different." "Is it?" "Because it looks exactly the same from where I'm sitting." His phone buzzed with a text from Cordelia. "Need you to call ASAP. Client threatening to pull the account." Nalaya saw him glance at it and shook her head. "You should go." "I'm not leaving." "You're already gone, Darian. You've been gone since that phone rang." The truth in her words hit him like a physical blow. Even here, even with his daughter facing potential homelessness, part of his mind was still calculating profit margins and damage control strategies. "Nalaya, I want to be here. I want to help. But I can't just abandon my business. And I can't abandon my life waiting for you to figure out how to balance yours." They stared at each other across the kitchen table, the same impasse that had ended their marriage sitting between them like an unwelcome guest. Amara, oblivious to the tension, dropped her sippy cup and clapped her hands together. "Dada, Mama." The simple words from their daughter's mouth seemed to emphasize everything they were failing to protect. "I think you should leave," Nalaya said quietly. "What?" "I think we moved too fast with this. I let myself believe that you'd really changed, but you haven't. Not in any way that matters. That's not fair. I've been here every visit. I've rearranged my entire schedule. You've rearranged your schedule when it's convenient. But the minute real life interferes, the minute something happens that doesn't fit into your predetermined time slots, you're right back to choosing work over family." His phone rang again. This time, he declined the call without looking. "See? You're already resenting it. You're already calculating how much this is costing you professionally." She was right, and they both knew it. "Maybe this was a mistake," Nalaya continued, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "Maybe it's better for Amara to have one parent who's completely committed than 2 parents where one is always half somewhere else. You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I think you should go back to your old life, and we'll go back to ours. Just like that. You're going to cut me out of her life again. I'm going to protect her from getting attached to someone who's going to disappoint her. Better she never knows you than spends her childhood wondering why Daddy's work is more important than she is." The words hit him exactly where she'd aimed them, at his own childhood memories of a father who was always at the office, or handling business, or providing for the family, but never just present. Amara reached toward him with sticky fingers, babbling something that sounded like his name, and Darian felt something break inside his chest. "I love her," he said quietly. I know you do, but love isn't enough if you can't prioritize it. His phone buzzed again. This time, Nalaya picked it up and handed it to him. Go, she said. Handle your crisis. Save your account. Build your empire. He took the phone but didn't answer it. What if I don't want the empire anymore? Then you better figure out what you do want. Because Amara deserves better than a part-time father who shows up when it's convenient and disappears when life gets complicated. She lifted Amara from her high chair and held her close, creating a clear barrier between them. 30 days. Darian, that's how long I have to find us a new place to live. And I'm going to do it the same way I've done everything else for the past 2 years. On my own. As he walked toward the door, Amara called out, Dada, one more time, her voice bright with innocent joy, and Darian realized that the most important business decision of his life had nothing to do with clients or profit margins. It was whether to answer that call or fight for his family. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what's worth keeping. Darian sat in his car outside Nalaya's building for 20 minutes, his phone silent in his hand. 3 missed calls from the London office, 2 from Cordelia, and 1 from Henderson himself. His entire professional reputation was likely crumbling while he stared at the eviction notice still taped to the building's front door. But for the first time in his adult life, he didn't care. Instead of returning the calls, he found himself thinking about his own father. Richard Voss had been a successful architect who designed buildings that still stood proudly across 3 states. But Darian's strongest memories weren't of pride in his father's accomplishments. They were of waiting by the window for a man who always arrived home after bedtime, of birthday parties where Dad was handling an emergency, of soccer games played to empty bleachers because the client needed this by Monday. He'd sworn he wouldn't become that man. Yet here he was, 36 years old, and his daughter knew his voice better from phone calls than from bedtime stories. His phone buzzed again. This time, instead of answering, he turned it off completely. The apartment search had consumed Nalaya's entire weekend. She'd looked at 7 places, each one more depressing than the last. The affordable options were either too far from Riverside High School or in neighborhoods where she wouldn't feel safe walking alone with Amara after dark. The safer places cost more than her entire monthly salary. By Sunday evening, she was sitting on her living room floor surrounded by rental listings, feeling like she was trying to solve an impossible equation. How do you provide stability for your child when every option requires sacrificing something essential? Amara crawled over and pulled herself up against Nalaya's knee, babbling contentedly while trying to grab the colorful rental flyers. Even in the midst of crisis, her daughter remained blissfully happy, trusting that Mama would figure everything out. That trust felt heavier than any responsibility Nalaya had ever carried. Her phone rang. For a moment, her heart jumped, thinking it might be Darian calling to apologize or explain. Instead, it was her principal. Nalaya, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to discuss something with you. Of course, Mrs. Rodriguez. I heard through the grapevine that you're dealing with housing issues. I know this might sound unconventional, but my mother-in-law has a basement apartment in Bay Ridge. It's small, but it's clean and safe, and she's been looking for a responsible tenant. Would you be interested in hearing more? The offer was kind, but Bay Ridge would add 90 minutes to her daily commute. More time away from Amara, more money spent on transportation, more stress trying to manage everything. I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Rodriguez. Let me think about it. Of course. But Nalaya, don't let pride keep you from accepting help when you need it. We all need community sometimes. After hanging up, Nalaya looked around the apartment that had been their safe haven for over a year. Amara's first steps had happened right here on this worn hardwood floor. Her first words, her first attempts at feeding herself, countless nights of reading stories and singing lullabies, all of it had happened within these walls. Starting over felt overwhelming. Monday morning brought unexpected news at Darian's office. He arrived to find Cordelia waiting with a stack of messages and an expression that suggested the weekend had been eventful. How bad is it? He asked, settling behind his desk. Henderson pulled the account. Yamamoto is requesting a meeting to discuss concerns about our commitment levels, and the London office wants to schedule a conference call about your recent unavailability during critical periods. Darian absorbed this information with surprising calm. 6 months ago, losing the Henderson account would have sent him into crisis mode. Today, it felt like problems happening to someone else's life. Anything else? Actually, yes. Cordelia's expression shifted slightly. I took the liberty of researching family-friendly corporate restructuring options. If you're serious about work-life balance, there are ways to reorganize without destroying everything you've built. He looked at her in surprise. Why would you do that? Because in 3 years of working for you, I've never seen you turn off your phone during a crisis. And because whoever called you on Saturday, they're worth more than any client. Her insight hit him unexpectedly. I have a daughter, 15 months old. I figured it was something like that. She placed a folder on his desk. These are some options. Remote management structures, delegation protocols, partnership possibilities that would reduce your day-to-day involvement while maintaining equity. That evening, instead of going home to his empty penthouse, Darian found himself walking the streets of Park Slope. He wasn't sure what he was looking for until he found himself standing outside Nalaya's building again, this time with a manila envelope in his hand. He climbed the stairs to the 5th floor and knocked softly. Nalaya opened the door holding Amara, who immediately squealed with delight and reached for him. Darian, what are you doing here? I wanted to apologize, and I wanted to give you this. He held out the envelope. She shifted Amara to one hip and took it reluctantly. What is it? A lease agreement for a 2-bedroom apartment in Windsor Terrace. Safe neighborhood, good schools, 15-minute commute to Riverside High. Her face went through several emotions at once. I told you I wouldn't take money from you. It's not charity, it's child support. Retroactive child support for the 15 months I missed, and ongoing support for our daughter's housing needs. Darian, I also quit Henderson. That stopped her mid-sentence. What? Actually, they fired me, but I would have quit anyway. I've been thinking about what you said, about priorities and being present, and you're right. I can't build a relationship with Amara around the edges of my career, so I'm restructuring everything. Nalaya stared at him, clearly trying to process this information. You can't just upend your entire life because I have a family. Yes, I can. I should have done it 2 years ago. Amara was babbling happily, grabbing at his tie and trying to put it in her mouth. The normalcy of her behavior contrasted sharply with the magnitude of the conversation happening around her. This doesn't fix everything, Nalaya said quietly. I know, but it's a start, and I was hoping, maybe you'd let me prove that I can be the kind of father Amara deserves. The kind of partner you deserved all along. Partner? The word had slipped out, but now that it was in the air between them, Darian realized he meant it. I know we have a lot to work through. I know I hurt you, and I know trust has to be earned. But I love our daughter, Nalaya, and I think I never stopped loving you. Nalaya looked down at the lease agreement, then at Amara, who had fallen asleep against Darian's shoulder. This is a lot to process. I know. Take your time. But whatever you decide about us, please let me help with this. He gestured toward the eviction notice still visible on her kitchen table. Let me be her father in the ways that matter. For a long moment, the only sound was Amara's soft breathing and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. And in that silence, Nalaya began to wonder if second chances were possible after all. Trust isn't rebuilt with grand gestures. It's reconstructed one small promise at a time. The new apartment in Windsor Terrace was everything the lease had promised. Hardwood floors that didn't creak, windows that actually opened, and enough space for Amara to crawl freely without bumping into furniture every few feet. But as Nalaya stood in the empty living room holding a box labeled Kitchen, Fragile, she felt more uncertain than relieved. The movers said they'll have everything here by noon, Darian said, appearing in the doorway with Amara balanced on his hip. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd become surprisingly adept at one-handed baby management while coordinating practical details. You don't have to do all this, Nalaya said for what felt like the 100th time. I know I don't have to. I want to. It was a distinction that mattered more than he probably realized. During their marriage, Darian's help had always felt obligatory, squeezed between more important commitments. This felt different, intentional, present, chosen. Amara squirmed in his arms and pointed toward the large window that faced the small backyard. Outside, outside. Soon, sweetheart, Nalaya said, taking their daughter and settling her on the floor with some toys. Let Mama and Daria figure out where everything goes first. She'd stopped trying to avoid saying his name around Amara. Their daughter was going to have a father in her life. That much was becoming clear. The question that remained was what role, if any, Nalaya would play in that dynamic beyond co-parenting. I brought lunch, Darian announced, holding up bags from the Thai place they used to love during their marriage. I remembered you always got the green curry, extra spicy. The fact that he remembered such a small detail after 2 years apart hit her unexpectedly. During the divorce proceedings, she'd felt like he barely knew her at all, her favorite foods, her teaching schedule, her dreams for the future. All of it had seemed secondary to his business concerns. "Thank you," she said quietly. They ate sitting on the floor, using cardboard boxes as tables while Amara practiced walking between them. Every few steps, she'd collapse into giggles and demand to be picked up, only to immediately ask to be put down again. "She's getting so steady on her feet," Darian observed. "When did she start walking?" "About 3 weeks ago. She took her first real steps the day after you started visiting regularly." Nalaya paused, then added, "I think having you around gave her confidence somehow." The admission surprised them both. It was the first time Nalaya had acknowledged that Darian's presence might have a positive impact on their daughter's development. "I've been thinking about what you said," Darian said carefully, "about trust and proving myself. I know I can't undo the past 2 years, but I want to understand what I can do moving forward." Nalaya considered his words while watching Amara attempt to stack wooden blocks with intense concentration. "It's not about grand gestures, Darian. It's about consistency, about being here for the boring stuff, not just the milestones. When she has a fever in the middle of the night, when she's cranky because she's teething, when I'm exhausted from grading papers and need someone to give her a bath." She met his eyes. "It's about showing up when it's inconvenient. I want to do those things. Wanting to and actually doing them are different things. You've had one job your entire adult life, being successful at work. Parenting is 100 small jobs that happen simultaneously, and most of them are thankless." As if summoned by their conversation, Amara chose that moment to knock over her carefully constructed block tower and burst into frustrated tears. Darian immediately moved toward her, but Nalaya held up a hand. "Let's see how you handle this without me stepping in." It was a test, and they both knew it. Darian approached Amara slowly, crouching down to her level. "Hey, sweet girl. Your tower fell down, huh? That's frustrating." Instead of immediately trying to fix the problem or distract her, he sat beside her and let her cry for a moment, offering his presence without trying to eliminate her feelings. "It's okay to be upset," he continued softly. "Building things is hard work. Should we try again together?" Amara's sobs gradually decreased to sniffles. She crawled onto his lap and buried her face against his chest, seeking comfort rather than entertainment. Nalaya watched the interaction with surprise. The Darian she'd been married to would have immediately started rebuilding the tower, turning the moment into a lesson or activity. This version simply held their daughter and acknowledged her emotions. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked. "Therapy, actually." He looked slightly embarrassed. "I've been seeing someone to work on understanding emotions better, mine and other people's." This was news to Nalaya. During their marriage, Darian had viewed therapy as self-indulgent, a waste of time that could be better spent on productive activities. "How long?" "Since the day you told me to figure out what I really wanted. I realized I didn't even know how to answer that question. I'd spent so many years focused on what I thought I should want that I'd lost track of what actually mattered to me." Amara had calmed down completely and was now playing with the buttons on Darian's shirt, babbling softly to herself. "And what do you want?" Nalaya asked. "This." He gestured around the sunny apartment, at their daughter, at the life they were tentatively building together. "I want to come home to people who matter more than any client. I want to know all of Amara's favorite songs and be the one who reads her stories before bed. I want to be someone she can count on, always." "What about us? You mentioned partnership before." Darian was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I want that too, but I know I have to earn it. I know you have every reason not to trust me with your heart again." He looked at her directly. "I'm not asking for promises or timelines. I'm just asking for the chance to show you that I've learned how to prioritize the things that matter." Nalaya's phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Oregon. "How's the move going? Are you and Mystery Dad working things out?" She'd been deliberately vague about Darian's reappearance in their lives, not ready to explain the complexity of the situation to family members who remembered how devastated she'd been during the divorce. "I should probably tell people," she said, more to herself than to him. "Tell them what? That you're back, that we're figuring things out." She looked at him holding their daughter, both of them content and relaxed. My sister's been asking questions about the mystery dad who helped with the apartment. What do you want to tell her? It was a fair question. What were they, exactly? Co-parents, certainly. Former spouses working toward friendship, maybe. Something more? That remained to be seen. I guess I want to tell her that you're trying, Nalaya said finally, and that trying matters more than I thought it would. As if sensing the weight of the moment, Amara clapped her hands together and laughed, the sound filling the empty apartment with pure joy. Mama, Dada, she announced proudly, then promptly crawled toward the window to point at a bird landing in the backyard. She's getting so verbal, Darian marveled. She talks constantly now. Last week she said book and more, and something that sounded like, love you. Did you record it? Of course I recorded it. I record everything. The admission highlighted one of the fundamental differences in their experiences. Nalaya had documented every moment of Amara's development, while Darian was encountering these milestones for the first time. I'd like to see them, he said quietly. The videos, if you're willing to share them. It was a small request, but it represented something larger, his desire to know the parts of his daughter's life he'd missed, to understand the full scope of what Nalaya had been managing alone. I can do that, she said, and as they sat together in their new home, watching their daughter discover the joy of sunlight streaming through clean windows, Nalaya began to believe that some bridges could be rebuilt after all. Real love is proven not in perfect moments, but in the chaos when everything goes wrong. The call came at 6:43 a.m. on a Thursday, jolting Darian from the deepest sleep he'd had in months. For a split second, muscle memory kicked in, and he reached for his phone expecting a work crisis. Then he saw Nalaya's name on the screen and his heart stopped. Darian, I need your help. Her voice was strained, tired, and beneath it he could hear Amara crying in the background. I think I have food poisoning. I've been throwing up since 3 a.m., and I can barely stand up, but Amara needs breakfast and I have to call in sick for work, and I'm on my way. He was already pulling on clothes with one hand while balancing the phone with the other. Don't worry about anything else, just rest. I'm sorry to call so early. I just didn't know who else. Nalaya, stop apologizing. This is what I'm here for. The drive to Windsor Terrace felt both endless and too short. Endless because every minute meant Nalaya was struggling alone with a sick body and a confused toddler. Too short because he realized he was about to face his first real test as a present parent, solo responsibility during a genuine emergency. He found the spare key where Nalaya had said it would be and let himself into the apartment quietly. The living room showed signs of a difficult night. Amara's toys scattered everywhere, an empty sleeve of crackers on the coffee table, and what looked like the remnants of multiple outfit changes draped over the couch. Nalaya, he called softly. Bathroom, came the weak reply. He followed the sound and found her sitting on the bathroom floor, pale and exhausted, with Amara in her lap. Their daughter was still in her pajamas, her hair a tangle of curls, and she was fussing in the specific way that meant she was hungry, but had been dealing with disrupted routine for too long. Hey, sweetheart, he said, crouching down to their level. Mama doesn't feel good, does she? Amara immediately reached for him, babbling something that sounded like complaint and relief mixed together. I tried to give her breakfast, but every time I stand up, Nalaya gestured helplessly toward the toilet. Don't worry about it. I've got her. He lifted Amara into his arms, and she immediately settled against his shoulder with a small sigh. What does she usually have for breakfast? Cut up bananas and toast with peanut butter. The bread is in the... I'll figure it out. You go back to bed, but she needs her vitamins, and her diaper should be changed. And there's a load of laundry in the washer that needs to be moved to the dryer. Nalaya, he touched her shoulder gently. I can handle this. You taught me. Remember, trust me. The word trust hung between them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond breakfast preparations. Her pediatrician's number is on the refrigerator if anything happens, Nalaya said, allowing him to help her stand. And she usually naps around 10, but only if she's had enough to eat and... I've got this, he repeated, more firmly this time. Rest. Once Nalaya was settled in bed with a glass of water and a phone nearby, Darian surveyed his domain. One 18-month-old, one kitchen full of unfamiliar baby-proofed cabinets, and approximately 12 hours until Nalaya would be functional again. He could do this, he hoped. Breakfast turned out to be more complicated than expected. Amara rejected the bananas. Nana, no. threw the toast on the floor, and seemed personally offended by his attempts to put her in the high chair. By 8 a.m., there was more food on both of them than had actually been consumed. "Okay, sweet girl," he said, wiping peanut butter out of her hair. "What do you actually want to eat?" "Cheerios," she announced clearly, pointing toward a cabinet he hadn't opened yet. Of course, the simplest solution had been right there the whole time. The rest of the morning became an education in toddler logistics. Everything took 3 times longer than anticipated. Changing a diaper required the patience of a diplomat and the reflexes of a goalkeeper. Getting Amara dressed became a negotiation involving 2 outfit changes and a 15-minute search for the specific socks she deemed acceptable. But slowly, they found their rhythm. By 10 a.m., Amara was fed, clean, and happily playing with blocks while Darian tackled the laundry. He discovered that child-sized clothes required an entirely different approach to folding, and that Amara had strong opinions about which stuffed animal needed to be washed immediately. When nap time arrived, he expected resistance. Instead, Amara crawled onto his lap during story time and fell asleep halfway through "Goodnight Moon," her small hand curled around his finger. Sitting in the rocking chair with his sleeping daughter, Darian felt something shift inside him. This wasn't the sanitized version of fatherhood he'd imagined during their weekend visits. This was real parenting, messy, exhausting, occasionally frustrating, and more meaningful than any business achievement he'd ever accomplished. Around noon, Nalaya emerged from the bedroom looking slightly more human. "How did it go?" she asked, surveying the living room, which showed signs of active toddler life but was reasonably organized. "We figured it out. She's napping, the laundry is done, and I only had to call you once to ask where you keep the emergency snacks. You called me. You didn't answer. You were sleeping." He gestured toward his phone. "I figured it out on my own." Nalaya looked surprised. During their marriage, Darian's default response to any domestic uncertainty had been to ask her to handle it or provide detailed instructions. The idea that he would problem-solve independently was new territory. "What did you need?" She had a complete meltdown around 11. "Nothing I tried worked. Not toys, not books, not different snacks." She just screamed for 20 minutes straight. He ran a hand through his hair. "I was starting to panic, honestly. But then I remembered what you said about sometimes they just need to be upset. So I sat with her and let her cry until she was ready to be comforted. And that worked. Eventually, she fell asleep in my arms afterward, and I think she needed that release." He paused. It was terrifying, but also, I felt like I actually helped her through something difficult instead of just trying to distract her from it. Nalaya studied his face, looking for signs of frustration or resentment about the challenging morning. Instead, she saw something she'd never seen before: pride in his ability to care for their daughter, satisfaction in meeting her needs even when it was difficult. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Tired, covered in various food substances, probably overthinking every decision I made." He smiled. "But good. Really good, actually." His phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the morning. Work calls he hadn't answered, messages he hadn't read. The old Darian would have been checking it compulsively, even during a family emergency. "Aren't you going to check your messages? They can wait." He said it with such certainty that Nalaya almost didn't believe him. "Today isn't about work. Today is about taking care of my family." The word family sent a small jolt through her. Not "my daughter" or "helping you out," but "my family." An acknowledgement that they were a unit worth prioritizing. "I need to tell you something," Nalaya said, settling beside him on the couch. "When I was lying in bed this morning, feeling awful and listening to you handle everything, I realized something." "What?" "I wasn't worried. For the first time since Amara was born, I was sick and couldn't take care of her, and I wasn't terrified that something would go wrong." She met his eyes. "I trusted you completely, and that scares me almost as much as it relieves me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because trusting you means admitting that I want this to work. Not just the co-parenting, but us. All of it." They sat in the quiet apartment, Amara sleeping peacefully in the next room, and for the first time since Darian had walked back into their lives, the future felt possible instead of terrifying. And when Amara woke up calling for both Mama and Dada, it felt like she was welcoming them home to something they'd built together. The greatest risk isn't falling in love again. It's believing you deserve it. 3 months later, Darian found himself standing outside the emergency room at Brooklyn Methodist for the second time. But this crisis was entirely different. This time, It was Nalaya who'd been brought in by ambulance after collapsing at school, and he was the person the hospital had called as her emergency contact. The irony wasn't lost on him that their relationship had come full circle to this same hospital where he'd first held his sick daughter and realized what truly mattered. "Family of Nalaya Pierce," a doctor called out. Darian stood up from the waiting room chair where he'd been bouncing an increasingly fussy Amara on his knee. "I'm her." He paused, realizing he didn't have a word for what he was. Ex-husband felt wrong. Partner seemed presumptuous. "I'm Amara's father," he settled on. "Nalaya listed me as her emergency contact." The doctor nodded. "She's stable. Severe exhaustion and dehydration. Her colleague said she's been working extra hours to cover for a maternity leave, plus grading final exams. When did she last take a real break?" Darian thought about the past few months. Nalaya had indeed been pushing herself harder than usual, staying up late to grade papers after spending full days with students, then coming home to manage all of Amara's needs. Even with his help 3 evenings a week, she was carrying the majority of the emotional and logistical load of their daughter's life. "I don't think she has," he admitted. "Can I see her?" "Room 318. She's awake, but needs rest." Carrying Amara down the familiar hospital corridor, Darian felt the weight of how much had changed since that first emergency visit. Then, he'd been a stranger trying to prove himself worthy of inclusion. Now he was the person Nalaya trusted to care for their daughter when she couldn't. He found her sitting up in the hospital bed, looking pale but alert. Her face lit up when she saw Amara, who immediately began babbling and reaching for her mama. "Hey, sweet girl," Nalaya murmured, taking their daughter into her arms. "Mama's okay. Just tired. The doctor said you collapsed during 5th period," Darian said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "Your students must have been terrified. Mrs. Rodriguez handled it well. She told them I just needed to rest, like when they get sick and need to stay home from school." Nalaya kissed the top of Amara's head. "I'm sorry you had to leave work early to pick her up from daycare. I didn't have to do anything. I wanted to be here." It was true. When the hospital had called, his first instinct hadn't been to calculate the professional inconvenience or wonder who could handle this instead. His first thought had been getting to Nalaya and making sure Amara felt secure during a scary situation. "The doctor wants to keep you overnight for observation," Darian continued. "I'll take Amara home and bring her back tomorrow morning. You don't have to." "Nalaya." He reached out and took her free hand. "We've been through this. This is what family does." The word hung between them, more loaded now than it had been even a few months ago, because somewhere in the routine of shared dinners and bedtime stories, somewhere between grocery shopping together and tag-teaming diaper changes, they had become a family, not officially, not with any formal declarations, but in all the ways that mattered. "I need to tell you something," Nalaya said quietly, glancing down at Amara, who was playing with the hospital bracelet on her wrist. "Before I collapsed today, I was in the faculty meeting thinking about summer vacation, about how I'd have 8 weeks off to spend with Amara, and all I could think was how much I wanted you to be part of that time. Not just visits or scheduled days, but everything. All of it." Darian felt his heart stop. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've been afraid to admit how much I want this to work, how much I want us to work." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I've been so scared of being disappointed again, that I've been protecting myself instead of really trying." "Nalaya." "No, let me finish. When I woke up in that ambulance today, the first person I wanted to see was you. Not because you're Amara's father, but because you're the person I love. Still. Again, I don't know which, but it doesn't matter." The admission hit him like a physical force. "You love me. I never stopped loving you, Darian. Even when I hated what our marriage had become, even when I was furious at you for missing everything important, I never stopped loving the person you were underneath all the ambition and fear." Amara chose that moment to clap her hands together and laugh, as if she approved of the conversation happening around her. "I love you too," Darian said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you and I love our daughter, and I love the life we've been building together. I want to make it official." "Official how?" He took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would change everything between them. "Move in with me. Not because of convenience or shared custody, but because we're a family and families live together. Because I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep knowing you're safe. Because I want Amara to grow up seeing what it looks like when two people choose each other every single day." Nalaya stared at him, processing the magnitude of what he was suggesting. "What about your penthouse? Your carefully organized life. I already sold it. What? Last month, I bought a house in Park Slope, 3 blocks from our apartment, 4 bedrooms, big backyard, walking distance to good schools. He smiled. I was hoping you'd want to see it sometime. You bought a house without telling me. I bought a house hoping I'd get the chance to tell you, hoping that maybe, eventually, you'd want to fill it with us. Nalaya was quiet for a long moment, looking down at Amara, who had fallen asleep against her chest. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of trusting this, of believing that you've really changed, that this isn't just a phase you're going through until something more interesting comes along. Darian understood her fear because he'd had the same doubts about himself. The difference was that months of consistent presence had proven to him what he'd only hoped was true before, that being Amara's father and Nalaya's partner wasn't a sacrifice he was making for love. It was the life he'd been searching for without knowing it. I can't promise I'll be perfect, he said. I can't promise I won't make mistakes or that there won't be times when work stress affects our family, but I can promise that you and Amara will always come first. Not eventually, not after I handle one more crisis, but always, every day. How do I know that's true? Because I chose you over a $40 million account. Because I turn off my phone during bedtime stories. Because when you called this morning, I didn't think about what I was missing at work. I only thought about getting to you. He reached out and touched Amara's sleeping hand. Because I'd rather change diapers with you than close deals with anyone else. Nalaya laughed through her tears. That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Is that a yes? It's a yes to trying. It's a yes to moving forward together and seeing what we can build. She looked up at him with eyes that held both love and lingering caution. It's a yes to being a family. Darian leaned forward and kissed her forehead, careful not to wake Amara. I love you, he said against her skin. Both of you. More than I ever knew it was possible to love anything. I love you too, she whispered back. And as they sat together in the hospital room, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, Darian realized that this was what success actually looked like. Not corner offices or international accounts, but this quiet moment of absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged. Sometimes the greatest victories happen in the smallest rooms, measured not in profit margins, but in the steady rhythm of a child's breathing and the warmth of a hand you get to hold forever. 2 years later, love isn't found in perfect moments. It's built in ordinary ones, day by day, choice by choice. The backyard of the Park Slope house was alive with the chaos of a 3-year-old's birthday party. Amara ran between the scattered toys and half-eaten cake slices, her dark curls bouncing as she chased soap bubbles that Darian's brother Kendrick was blowing from the porch steps. Her laughter filled the afternoon air, mixing with the conversations of friends and family who had gathered to celebrate. Nalaya stood at the kitchen window, watching the scene unfold with the contentment that comes from seeing your child completely, unself-consciously happy. Her wedding ring caught the sunlight as she reached for another pitcher of lemonade, a simple gold band that Darian had placed on her finger 6 months ago during a small ceremony in this same backyard, with Amara as their flower girl and their closest friends as witnesses. Mama, Daddy, look! Amara called out, pointing at a particularly large bubble that had somehow managed to float above the fence into the neighbor's yard. Daddy. The word still sent a small thrill through Darian's chest every time he heard it. Not the tentative dada of a confused toddler, but the confident claim of a child who knew exactly who belonged to her and who she belonged to. I see it, sweetheart, he called back, then jogged over to scoop her up when she stumbled over her own feet in excitement. Big bubble, huh? Biggest ever, she declared with the absolute certainty that only 3-year-olds possess. Mrs. Rodriguez, Nalaya's principal, approached carrying a gift bag and wearing the fond expression of someone who had watched this family's journey from the very beginning. How are the newlyweds adjusting to married life? She asked with a knowing smile. Still figuring it out day by day, Nalaya replied, joining them with the lemonade. But it turns out that's what makes it work. The daily choice to keep choosing each other. It was true. Marriage the second time around felt completely different from their first attempt. There were no unrealistic expectations about perfect compatibility or effortless harmony. Instead, there was the mature understanding that love was a verb, something you did rather than something you felt. Some days were easier than others, but every morning they woke up and decided to be present for each other and for Amara. Uncle Kendrick says he's going to teach me guitar, Amara announced, wriggling down from Darian's arms to demonstrate some impressive air guitar moves. "Does he now?" Nalaya laughed. "What do you think about that, Daddy?" The casual use of the word still made Darian's heart skip slightly. During their first marriage, Nalaya had never talked about him becoming a father, partly because he'd made it clear that children were a someday conversation that kept getting pushed to a vague future that never arrived. "I think Uncle Kendrick better be prepared for a very enthusiastic student," Darian replied, ruffling Amara's hair. As the afternoon wore on, Darian found himself doing something he'd never done during their first marriage. He put his phone away completely, not on silent, not face down on a nearby table, but actually inside the house, charging in the kitchen drawer where it couldn't tempt him with notifications about work emergencies that weren't really emergencies. His business had evolved too. The restructuring he'd implemented 2 years ago had created a company that ran efficiently, without requiring his constant oversight. He'd promoted several team members to senior positions, implemented systems that allowed for true delegation, and most importantly, established boundaries that protected his family time from professional intrusion. The financial success had actually increased rather than decreased. Turns out that a CEO who was well-rested, emotionally stable, and genuinely present during work hours was more effective than one who was constantly distracted by trying to manage everything personally. "Remember when you used to check your phone every 5 minutes?" Nalaya said, settling beside him on the porch swing as the party began winding down. "Remember when you used to handle everything by yourself because you were afraid to depend on anyone?" he countered gently. They both smiled at how far they'd come. Nalaya had learned to accept help gracefully, to share the load of parenting and household management without feeling like she was imposing. Darian had learned that being needed wasn't a burden, but a privilege, that contributing to daily life wasn't about grand gestures but about consistent presence. "Mama, Daddy, come push me," Amara called from the swing set that Darian had installed last spring, after consulting 3 different safety guides and probably over-engineering the entire structure. They walked over together, and Darian began pushing while Nalaya stood in front, making silly faces that sent Amara into fits of giggles. "Higher! Higher!" their daughter demanded. "How high?" Darian asked. "To the clouds. To the clouds it is." As the sun began to set and the last of their guests said their goodbyes, the 3 of them found themselves alone in their backyard, surrounded by the detritus of a successful party, but also by the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Amara had fallen asleep in Nalaya's lap, worn out from excitement and sugar, her small fist still clutching a deflated balloon from earlier in the day. "Should we put her to bed?" Darian asked softly. "In a minute," Nalaya replied, stroking their daughter's hair. "I want to remember this. All of it." Darian understood. These were the moments that mattered, not the milestone celebrations or the major life events, but the quiet endings to ordinary days when you realized that everything you'd ever wanted was right here in your arms. "I love our life," he said simply. "Even the chaos? Even when she has meltdowns in grocery stores and refuses to eat anything but goldfish crackers for 3 days straight? Especially then." He reached over and took Nalaya's free hand. "I love that we get to figure it out together. I love that when things go wrong, we're on the same team instead of pointing fingers at each other." "I love that too," she agreed. "I love that you read her the same 3 books every night and never complain about it. I love that you know exactly how to make her laugh when she's cranky. I love that she feels safe with both of us." As if summoned by their conversation, Amara stirred slightly and mumbled something that sounded like, "Love you too," before settling back into deep sleep. They sat together as darkness fell around them, their daughter peaceful between them, and Darian felt the profound contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. "What are you thinking about?" Nalaya asked quietly. "I'm thinking about that day at the bus stop, when I first saw you with her." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I spent so many years building things that I thought would make me happy. The company, the reputation, the financial security. But none of it felt real. It was all just construction. And this feels like coming home to something I didn't even know I was missing." Nalaya leaned against his shoulder, and they listened to the evening sounds of their neighborhood, distant music from another backyard gathering, the hum of air conditioners, the occasional car passing on the street. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The path we took to get here, all the time we lost?" Darian considered the question seriously. 2 years of separation. A daughter's first year of life that he'd missed, the pain they'd both endured during their divorce. It would be easy to focus on what they'd lost. "I think we needed to become the people we are now before we could build this," he said finally. "You needed to know you could do it all on your own, and I needed to learn that success without love is just expensive loneliness." That's very philosophical for someone who used to think therapy was a waste of time. I've learned a lot of things I used to think were wastes of time are actually the most important things. He kissed the top of her head, like birthday parties in backyards, and reading the same story 17 times in a row, and sitting on porches with the people you love. Amara murmured something in her sleep and shifted closer to Nalaya, her breathing deep and steady. "We should probably get her inside," Nalaya said reluctantly. "Probably," but neither of them moved. They stayed there on the porch swing, holding their daughter and each other, watching the stars appear one by one in the Brooklyn sky above their little house full of love and laughter, and all the ordinary magic that makes a family. And when they finally did carry Amara inside, tucking her into the bed surrounded by stuffed animals and children's books, Darian realized that this was what he'd been searching for his entire life without knowing it. Not success, not achievement, not the respect of clients or the admiration of competitors. Just this, the weight of a sleeping child in his arms, the warmth of his wife's hand in his, and the absolute certainty that tomorrow would bring more of the same beautiful, chaotic, perfect ordinary moments that make up a life worth living. Some stories end with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. The best ones end with quiet contentment and the promise of countless tomorrows filled with love. What did this story teach you about love, family, and second chances? Have you ever had to choose between professional success and personal happiness? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.